Hi, folks. Welcome. Um, if you're returning, great. We're moving into the next chapter, and we're going to start talking about homeschooling my boys. If you're new to my channel, then you should know that I've been telling my story because the Lord called me to do it and share testimony on how He's walked with me through my life and things that He's done to be with me and carry me through. And I wrote a book about it, and I've been reading through the chapters of my book in these videos. I've give it to the Lord, and who sees it and who don't or whatever, and we're just going to see where it goes from here based off the fact that the Lord called me to do it. So I want to get into this, and we're going to be talking about homeschooling. If that's something you've ever had an interest in, I encourage you to stay around for the whole video. The beginning, I'm going to talk about why we did it. I am glad we did, and at the end, can give you a little pointers on how to get started and some of the tips and tricks we did to help keep things organized. So let's get started. For those of you who don't know, I have two sons. My oldest son went to public school from kindergarten through third grade. My youngest son only went to kindergarten in public school. That was it. My oldest son, he was a very quiet child. He's got a very gentle spirit about him. Excuse me. He couldn't wait to start school. He would sit we had a window behind our sofa, and he would stand there and watch the school bus every morning come and pick up some of the other kids, and he just couldn't wait to go to school. Well, he finally did get to start. When he had a good driver at that time, he was a nice guy, and he helped look out for the little kids. Keep in mind, my son was only 5. So knowing that put me a little ease for him riding the school bus. Not long after school started, he was having a kid do some mean things to him at school. And we had tried to encourage our son to walk away from a fight if he can. Well, I told him, he came home and told me about the incident, and I'm like, well, tell your teacher, that's what she's there for. She can help put a stop to that. Well, he told his teacher, and she actually punished my son for being a tattletale. She made him sit separately at the lunch table, all kinds of stuff. I mean, she just really punished him for being upfront and honest and saying what was happening to him. So kind of after that point, he wouldn't tell nobody. He was suffering in silence because he got punished for being a tattletale when he tried to say what was happening to him. So, come to find out, his kindergarten teacher herself was kind of a bully. She had been burned out, I guess. She needed to retire, honestly, and I think she did after that year my son was in her class, but she had been dragging people across the gym and all kinds of stuff. I heard all kinds of stories after the fact. She shouldn't have been a teacher, honestly. But anyway, he moved on to first grade. He had a good teacher in first grade. She's a very sweet lady. But he was still getting bullied. And at this time, he had a new bus driver. And there was a kid that literally kicked my son off the bus. This bus driver was a jerk. I mean, he really was. So at this point, we decided we was going to pull our son off the school bus. So I started taking him to school every day. The Lord started dealing with me to homeschool. I likened myself to Moses. Oh me, you sure you want me to do this? I don't want to mess up my kid. I'm not sure. That's the thing. And I'm going to pause here and just interject that when the Lord calls you to do something, He's going to provide you with the means to get it done. I wish I had listened sooner than I did, but I argued with the Lord for 2 years and didn't do it. I was so worried I was going to mess up my son by homeschooling him when in fact not homeschooling him was what was causing damage to my kid. Public school was causing damage to my kid. I watched my son become this sweet little boy into this introvert. He turned inside himself, and none of it was good. Second grade is when we started having some more serious issues. His school teacher spent most of her day talking to her daughter on the phone rather than trying to pay attention to what was going on in her classroom. My son was being stabbed in the back with pencils. And when he would turn around and tell the boy to be quiet, stop doing that, my son got punished for talking in class and disrupting class. He was being hurt, but my son was the one being punished. It got to a point, like I said, where he wouldn't tell nobody what was going on. There was a kid twisting his arms up behind his back, things like that in the bathroom. One day he was here home, and he had just gotten out of the shower, and I noticed the marks on his back. Well, my husband took him to school and said, "Look, here's what's going on. Y'all need to do something about it." The teacher actually cried, according to my husband. She felt bad about what had happened. I think at this point, maybe he got moved to a different desk where this kid couldn't do those things. He was having trouble about daydreaming in class, supposedly. We found out he was having staring seizures. He also has ADD. Hyper is not his problem. He didn't really have issues with that. But the meds they put him on caused a rash around his waist and various places. The doctor blamed it on our cat. Well, I made a command decision as a parent, and sometimes we have to do that. And I just took him off the meds and said, "We're not doing this anymore." The rash immediately cleared up. I ended up taking him to a different doctor, and he told me that I probably saved my son's life because that rash was a sign of a serious side effect. So I didn't put him on seizure medicine anymore after that. He was just, they had told us that the seizures were something that he could outgrow at his age, and he pretty much did. He's not had any seizure problems. He's grown now. He does still have ADD and trouble focusing, but no seizures. Well, as he moved on, things escalated with the bullies. He was being held down. He moved on into third grade. He was being held down by bullies on the PE field. They would grab him around his neck, try to choke him. One would hold him down while other kids kicked him. This was just getting out of control. Also, the PE teacher at that time, she did not supervise the kids. She stayed up next to the building during the PE time, and she was talking to other teachers about her personal private life because the principal at the school at the time had what everyone, the parents included, called him his harem. He was a married man having adulterous affairs with 4 other school teachers. It was all a thing. They shared him, okay? And I know this because of another teacher at the school that knew what was going on, and she told us about it. But the PE teacher would spend her time during PE talking to another teacher about her personal life. She wasn't paying attention to what was going on the field. So, at this point, my youngest son was now in kindergarten, and she had that same PE teacher. So, he needed to go to the bathroom. Keep in mind, he was 5. My other son was pushing 8 at this point. He needed to go to the bathroom, and this teacher wouldn't let him. She just told him to go on. They weren't allowed to go near her, apparently. Anyway, he wet himself at school. He was so embarrassed. For a 5-year-old, he was very, very embarrassed and humiliated by the fact that he couldn't make it to the bathroom. Anyway, I went to the school to pick up my son and got him dry clothes and all that. Well, like I said, the principal didn't really want to do anything because the teachers that needed to step in and help my son were part of his harem, and he wasn't going to reprimand those women. We even wound up having to go to the superintendent. Our superintendent used to be elected, but he's not elected anymore. And we got this lazy bum that sits behind a desk. If you try to go to his office and talk to him, he has you arrested. Yes. So, only way we could get through him was through written correspondence. And they basically blamed my son. They said, well, he don't know the name of all the boys that was attacking him, so we can't do anything about it. So, the principal, like I said, blamed my son. The superintendent was no help. I finally told my son I didn't care what you have to do to defend yourself. We had tried to teach our son to walk away from a fight if you can, because escalation just leads to worse things. We were trying to teach him a biblical point of view as well. But I finally told him, I said, son, they're not looking out for you, so I don't care what you gotta do. Bite them, kick them, scratch them, scream at the top of your lungs. Do whatever you gotta do to get these people off of you. Well, he finally did. Some kid came up behind him, held him down, he bit him. That boy screamed so loud that the teacher on the field didn't come to do nothing about it. A teacher from inside the building came outside. Come to find out, we knew the parents of this kid, and he claims he was just trying to play around. But anyway, that kid now has a scar on his shoulder for the rest of his life. But anyway, the parents of this boy, they reprimanded their son. But my husband almost got arrested for confronting the principal at this point. My oldest son, like I said, he became an introvert into himself. He started talking about hurting himself, and he felt worthless. At this point, I was like, we got to do something. We were close to the end of the school year when some of this stuff took place, so we decided to tough it out for the last couple of weeks of school, and that he would never again return to that school. So that also gave me time to prepare. I was in college myself at this point, and I had a couple of semesters left to go. So we worked it out. So by the time I graduated my college, instead of starting a business and getting into that, I had to change gears and do what was best for my kids and start homeschooling them. And as I mentioned before, God had been dealing with me, and I put it off, and my son paid the price. I had already taught my youngest son how to read before he even went to kindergarten. He already knew how to read books. So I figured if I teach him everything I know, he'll be okay. But I finally decided that homeschooling was the way to go, and we got everything set up. It was the best decision we ever made. We worked at our own pace. With my son's ADD, that was the most perfect thing. If he needed to get up, take a break, and go to the bathroom, we had that option. If he needed a little extra time on something, we had we could take an extra day to work on it until he got it. We could take our schooling with us wherever we go. With my husband being a veteran and having to go to these doctor's appointments all the time, we would just take our schoolwork with us. While my husband was getting his appointment and waiting, we were in the cafeteria, they had this little break area that we could sit down and do our schoolwork while Dad was having his doctor's appointment. We were able to choose our own electives. I was in complete control of what my kids were learning, instead of a public school teaching them things. My husband and I had already believed that all our values and so forth that go into our children should come from us, not other people. We used to pre-watch movies before we let our kids watch them. If there was something in that movie they didn't need to see, we would fast forward that part, or we would just ban them from watching that movie altogether. They never watched a single Shrek movie because of some of the rude, crude behaviors in that movie. There was also some adult content in there, so we never let our kids watch it. There's a couple other movies, same thing. Our boys had Bible study every day. 6 days a week they studied the Bible. And I say 6 because they had Sunday school on Sundays. So Monday through Friday we had a Bible class. Our boys knew the Bible better than some adults at that point. Now that they're grown, they're probably forgotten some of what they learned. But anyway, there were some stressful days, and it takes discipline to homeschool. It also takes organization. If you get yourself organized, it helps a lot. I would do lesson plans. I used the Word program on my computer, and I created some forms, and I made my own lesson plans, so the boys knew exactly what they were supposed to do every day. And I usually got the lesson plans done on Sunday afternoons. I also created my own forms for a report card. I used the spreadsheet program. You could put in the mathematical formulas in the little cells, and I could put in a test score, and voila, his average was already ready to go. I didn't have to do all the math. Anyway, I got so sick and tired of the worldview on this issue. Everybody talking about you're missing out on social skills. Well, first of all, that's hogwash. Baloney, crap, whatever you want to call it. Your kids start learning social skills from the day they are born. They learn how to cry so you'll change their diaper. They learn how to cry a certain way so you can give them something to eat. And at some point, you know the different cries. A mama does anyway. She knows that cry means I'm hungry, and this different cry means that you need a diaper. Okay. The fact of the matter is, you get social skills from interacting with siblings. You get social skills from interacting with your parents. Anytime our kids would go to a store, they paid for their own stuff. They got social interaction that way as well. They also were involved in recreational sports. Kids at school, they got social skills. It just wasn't through the public school system. And I also want to point out what my kids missed out on in social skills from public school. They missed out on being rude and obnoxious. They missed out on being disrespectful and hateful. So, kids learn social skills from school all right, none of them good. They also missed out on being brainwashed into this leftist ideology that a lot of kids are suffering from now. I look at my boys as adults, and I look at other kids his age, and we are so thankful that we listened to the Lord and we homeschooled our sons. I went through some of this already. Our kids participated with kids at church activities. They interacted with kids in baseball. Every time we would go to a doctor's office, we got the most compliments on the behavior of our kids. They're like, your kids are so calm and sweet and this, that, and the other compared to other kids. We were constantly being told how much better behaved our kids are. Even my brother, he's got 3 sons of his own, and he's like, their kids behave better than ours. Some of that difference was our biblical values, and some of it was because we protected them from some of these negative influences in their lives. Also, when you're homeschooling, there's basic curriculum you have to cover. But by being able to school at home, we were able to take an interest in things that our boys weren't interested in. For example, my husband and I sat down and made out a list of everything a young man needs to know how to do. And we had a class on that. Every day they learned how to do something different. They learned how to change a tire. They learned how to plug a hole in a tire. They learned how to check the oil in their vehicle, change the oil in their vehicles. They learned how to do things, too, that weren't vehicular related. But, those were things we knew that when they started driving, that we could be sure that they wouldn't be totally oblivious to how to handle the situation. We also had a cooking class where they got to pick the menu and cook what they wanted to try. have a long, recipe book and this, that, and the other. And they're like, ooh, I want to try this. And now my oldest son, he's quite the cook. He loves to barbecue and grill on the grill. He's 25 now. But he's become quite the cook, so it's pretty cool. They also learned how to go fishing. They learned how to catch fish and clean fish. My youngest son wanted to be a veterinarian, so we geared a lot of his schoolwork toward things having to do with animals. He is very educated in animals. He loved birds of prey. Owls and hawks are his favorite. Cooper's hawk, I think, is his absolute favorite. But he learned that he didn't quite have the stomach for cleaning fish. He liked to catch them, but cleaning them was a little bit difficult. I also taught them how to sew button on their shirt. We taught them how to wash their clothes. Guys need to know how to do that, especially if you go off to college and things like that. So, we also taught, like I said, my son learned about animals. So, he learned about things dealing with, taking care of his pets. And we've had many pets through the years. We've had a couple of bearded dragons. We've had 2 of those. We've had 2 parrots. One we still have. One passed away because he fell asleep and fell off his perch. And when he fell in his cage, his neck broke. So that broke my son's heart because he loved that bird. We had a Quaker parrot. He was very, very loud. But not quite as loud as our Nanday conure. Okay. But anyway, they like to talk. They learn to mimic. We had an inside dog, and one of our birds would call the dog. And, whistle to the dog and click, click, like that kind of noise. So it's pretty neat that the birds could call the dog. And our dog would eat the peanuts that the bird would drop. Anyway, we also taught them the value of money. We had something called Mama Dollars and Daddy Dollars. I made little dollar bills with my picture on it and Dad's picture. They didn't get paid for doing their chores, okay? They had chores they had to do that was just part of being a kid. And cleaning the toilet and scrubbing the tub and keeping their bathroom clean, that was part of their chores. They had to do it. And we set up a schedule for them. The toilet got cleaned twice a week. Each son got to do it once. They helped with vacuuming. They helped with things like that. Keeping their space clean, that was their job. But when I would see them go out of their way to help somebody else, I'd grab my mommy dollar. And keep in mind, they were only worth like 50 cents. And the reason we did this is because they got paid when we got paid. So this is their way of saying, Mom, you owe me this. But anyway, they earned their own money. When they saw them, they would go out of their way to help me, say, hang laundry. They weren't quite old enough to do it themselves yet. But anytime they was helping me out, doing a little extra, I'd help. I wanted to reward good behavior rather than focusing on punishing bad behavior. And then later on, we did have certain chores we could pay them to do, like keep the grass cut. That helped out a lot with my husband's issues. They also got money for their birthdays and Christmas presents, of course. Grandparents give you money. So, we didn't necessarily reward them for every extra thing, but they had to have a way of earning their own way. Like, we would buy them the things they need, but if they wanted toys, they had to earn that money. And we kept the chores age appropriate. Now, we're getting to the end of this here where I'm going to talk about how you get started with it, but I homeschooled our boys for 11 years. My youngest son graduated 1 year early, and both my boys have gone to college. With our world in its current state, I am so glad that we homeschooled our boys. Our boys know how to read cursive and write in cursive. They never had to deal with some of the that Common Core garbage they teach in school. No, they learned it the same way I did, and they do just fine. And quite frankly, out in the real world, nobody even does math by hand anymore. They all want to use a calculator. Nobody wants to use a dictionary anymore. They Google everything. So we made sure they kind of got raised up learning things the way I learned them, so they know how to do it. I figured it worked for me my whole life. It'll work for them too. There are a lot of things that public school teaches that have nothing to do with going into college, by the way. Our sons also learn how to think for themselves. That's a thing. But if you're interested in homeschooling your kids and you're thinking about it, stop thinking about it and just do it, okay? The fact of the matter is, nowhere in the Bible does it say that you should let the government school your children. As a matter of fact, in the early part of our nation, parents did school their kids. They were a lot of people that lived out in these far places. They had to. There was no school to send their kids to, or if there was a school, it was way too far. So homeschooling was a normal way of life at one point in time in our country until the government got involved. So, and the Bible does speak to parents about teaching their kids. It tells us in Deuteronomy about teaching our kids the ways of the Lord. From the time you wake up in the morning, during the day, when you're walking around, and I'm paraphrasing here, and till the time you go to bed at night. That's our job as parents. And whether you like it or not, you're teaching your kids from the time they're born anyway. You're teaching them how to say please and thank you. You're teaching them how to eat properly with a spoon and a fork. You're teaching them how to walk. You're teaching them everything they need to know. And at a certain age, toddler age and so forth, they're like sponges. I mean, if you say a word, they're going to repeat it, okay? If you're going to throw something across the room, and I caught myself doing this with a couple of our foster kids recently. I just picked up toys and started tossing them into their little makeshift toy box, and I was like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't do that. I just taught them to throw toys across the room. So I had to catch myself because they wanted to sit like me and, you know, things like that. So your kids are learning everything from you, whether you like it or not. So you have to be mindful of what you're saying and what you're doing because they're watching. So that let them see you praying. Let them see you spending time with the Lord. Let them see you reading the Bible, because those are things that translate into your kids. The Bible says you raise them up in the way of the Lord. When they're old, they won't depart from it. So I'm holding to that. And yes, there are core subjects that have to be taught. You have to teach language arts. You have to teach math. You have to teach some kind of social sciences. Anyway, there's 4 core subjects. I'd have to relook at them. I don't have it in front of me. But we would teach electives such as civics is an elective, music is an elective. We actually took one of our sons to get guitar lessons. We counted that as part of his homeschooling. Their participation in baseball, that counted as PE as far as we were concerned. Also their karate classes. They went to karate classes twice a week. And so that was also exercise and PE. They also played outside every day for a couple hours. So they got plenty of physical activity. Also, if we had somewhere we needed to go or needed to be on a certain day, we could work ahead of time. So in other words, on Monday, he would work ahead in one of his other classes. So Monday, he might do 2 maths. Tuesday, he might do 2 language arts. Wednesday, he might do 2 of his science classes. So that day we needed off, we had a day off. They got all their work done, but they were able to take that day off. And you did not count it as an absence because they did the work, quite frankly. Also, like I said, we used the program on my computer and made the lesson plan pages. I had a thing that was for the grade book. If your kid's curriculum is on a computer, we had to go through there and know what was on the test so we could teach our kids what to study. You know, what I mean is, when I was in school, our teacher gave us notes, and the test came off those notes. So I had to go through those exams and know what was on the test so that I could tell my son, hey, this is going to be on your test. You need to know these things. So we would highlight some things in their lessons and say, those are your notes. You need to write those down. So they got practice writing in cursive their notes. And also, so there's I know you're telling them what their notes are, but they still got to study it and keep it in their mind before the test. And also, by doing the writing, they're learning that way. They're getting writing skills and so forth. They're also, before they started work the next day, I'd have them read over their notes. So they were keeping those things fresh in their mind. So they were learning how to study. So before you start class, read through your notes, yada, yada, yada. So every day it was fresh. So I'm at a point here where I'm not sure what else to talk about concerning homeschool and how to do it, but bottom line, I'm glad we did it. And I've asked my sons, and they're like, Mom, I'm so glad you homeschooled us. I'm so glad you protected us from this and kept us from that. So it's not something you're going to regret doing. It is hard work sometimes, but if you organize yourself and get disciplined, you can do it. Stop beating yourself up and thinking you can't do it, because you can do it. If you got through school yourself, you can help your kids, okay? Stop letting the government tell you what you can and can't do with your own children. And stop letting society to tell you what you can and can't do. Just make up your mind that I'm determined I'm going to do this. Ha ha ha. So, anyway, that is it for homeschool right now. I've only got 3 chapters left of my book. Of course, that's not the end of my story. I'm still breathing. So as long as I'm breathing, I'm still, growing my story. But next week, I'm going to talk about my father, part 2. So tune in for that. And I hope you guys have a good week.